Well, good afternoon, Scott Baker. Good afternoon, Joe Watson. We are here to talk about field notes today.
Yeah, Mikey, I don't know if Joe is prepared because yesterday's edition was pretty spectacular because in the middle of it, like my phone went off with the emergency 911 alert right in the middle of the show. Like we had an emergency, which was crazy. It was great fun. So Joe, you better bring the thunder here to keep it exciting today.
Well, Scott, it's great to hear that from the perspective of, I think leadership's important. And clearly others out there in the world thought leadership was important too, if they took over your phone and all your other electronics. And, my hope is that I can only maintain the same level of elevation that you and Mikey were able to achieve that cause your devices to kind of freeze and function differently.
For sure.
So strong, right. We tapped into, emergency management systems for all of Pennsylvania. That was great.
We did. Well, the field note for today, which is, by the way, field note 1,495 for those of you who've been keeping track over the last 4 years and the 179 countries around the world that subscribe. The headline is not the headline. The headline says the key discipline for following up. And I know everybody that just loves leadership is like, oh, could I join a live conversation or listen to a podcast later about following up? That just... It's at the bottom. The very bottom of the field note says the holy grail of effectiveness. Yeah. Now I think I've set the stage for this. And I don't know, Joe, if you agree, but how could you make a case that following up is the holy grail of effectiveness?
Well, Scott, to me, the key is it's all about driving results at the end of the day, right? Because if you follow this in terms of tea leaves, right? Follow up equals results. Right. And at the end of the day, as a leader, right, when we think about efficacy and we think about how others measure efficacy and frankly, how your team measures efficacy, results have a lot to do with it. Right. People need to see to reinforce their behavior, to continue to follow you in a credible way, to see how the actions they take, the right actions under their own and your guidance lead to the most positive outcome that they can achieve. Folks sacrifice a lot in terms of their time, in terms of time away from family, in terms of their interests. To work towards a common goal and common mission. And to me, if that isn't a holy grail to achieve results as part of that, to validate that sacrifice, I don't know what there is.
There we go. Now, Joe and I are both relatively sharp individuals, and I think we take notes and we try to learn. But Mikey comes out of that, I don't know, is it still purely a bullet journal? But you've got such detailed systems and things that you do. Is this part of an ethos that Joe and I don't understand that makes you bullet journal people more wildly effective?
I don't think so. I think I just needed a system. Maybe it came more intuitively from you. Right? And the way that I think about it is primarily around breaking things down into sub skills, right? Mm-hmm. And so anytime you have an athletic coach who actually dwells on this, there seems to be a huge advantage for them as well. Breaking, some of the, even if you're talking about rebounding, right? So let's actually drill the sub skills in such a way that allows you to be able to, really perfect your craft. So I love this field note because it feels like it's the same sort of thing. When you're bullet journaling, it kind of forces you to be like, well, if I'm going to actually get some things done or have other people get things done, it just puts it right in front of you for the idea of like you're writing down and you're forwarding it to tomorrow, and you actually want to like separate it. The tendency for people who bullet journal regularly is to be able to cross as many things off to feel really accomplished.
Right. Yeah, no doubt.
So that notion of breaking things down into sub skills is kind of a little bit more natural for people who would bullet journal in that kind of way.
Now, I don't know if Joe's going to be as vulnerable as you sharing the ethos of the bullet journal. I'm going to throw down and say, I'll see your bullet journal and I'll raise you my moleskin reporter style notebook. But there's a harsh part of this field note that then opens up to a possibility here, because it goes hard on you when it's saying, well, why don't people build in the follow-up, the follow-through, the next steps? And then in bold, which I chose the bold, they lack the full urgency and self-discipline. Oh, man, it's like, that's it. We're all falling short. We falter. Now, the next part, field note insight here on the strategy of the bold. So when I do the bold, sometimes it's the key phrase. Sometimes it's the phrase that you have to actually, you're reading it and you're like, it's not the key phrase, but it's getting you set up. So I bolded the key to follow up. And now you actually have to read the rest of the sentence to get there. And it's the further actions are defined before you complete the last step. Or like if you're in the meeting, it's not like the meeting's over and the next day we're like, well, what's our follow-up before next Friday? You define it in the moment. Now, I don't know, Joe, you've had way more executive experience, I think, than Mikey and I. Has this resonated with you as true in reality?
Oh, no question, Scott. I mean, here's the thing. When everybody comes into a setting in a meeting, what you essentially do is you suspend everything that's going on in the outside world, right? And the moment that meeting ends, the outside world floods back in.
Comes back in, right?
Right, it floods right back in, right? So here's the key. If you haven't locked in the momentum of the moment, right, in that meeting, you risk losing it as soon as the flood returns, right? And we all understand today in life that we're dealing with a non-ending, right? A never-ending stream of requirements, demands, more things for the list. And so I think that's part of it. I think the other part, though, that's really, really neat, that I really enjoyed at the field note, was really thinking about not only kind of locking it in, if you will, and agreeing what the commitment was, but as the leader, which I think is really the secret sauce in this, right? Committing to the part you were going to put on your list. And so what you're doing in that moment, right, is creating that reinforcing element to the action you jointly agree on together that will ensure that momentum is maintained. Because a leader's job is to build, sustain, and maintain momentum.
Yeah. Well, I also like the fact that you talked about this flood of reality, because the image that came to my mind was probably exactly what came to Mikey's mind and everybody watching right now, which was the old cone of silence from the Get Smart, TV series, 50 years ago, where the cone of silence would come down around the meeting. Now it never worked. In theory, it was a good idea. It would block out the outside world, but it always did something terrible to the people underneath the cone. But in theory, yes, we lived in that world. So for you, Mikey, when reality comes flooding back in, have you found, and I'm going to share my much more powerful insights from my Moleskine method, but has your crossing off and following up through on your journal, has that made you more effective on the follow through, as opposed to just new items that go on your to-do list?
It's made me more effective only in the fact that I think of it as my responsibility, or at least my shared responsibility, right? But this kind of field note makes me think of like, I need to kind of, if I had a meeting of 6 people and follow-up was going to be a concern for me, then I'm going to break up maybe 4 or 5 milestones in order for us to accomplish that project. I also, and this came up in the comments, like, how much can you follow up with people before they just think that you're micromanaging them, right? There's going to be a real pain if you're just coming up with creative ways to say, I'm checking in, right? And there are great ways that you can check in without saying you're checking in. You could ask for help. There's a few that are, you could volunteer, right? There's a natural thing to that, but at some point it's just going to feel like you're nagging me, right? And where isn't this micromanagement? So before we just dive into micromanagement, when I'm bullet journaling out a project and I know that I need to manage other people in the process, but I actually don't want to let go, it's still my responsibility, even though they're the ones that are actually going to be the task. I want to write in for myself, like when I'm going to follow up and how in order to do that. So there might be 4 or 5 different, but if I'm thinking about that ahead of time, it's more than just what Joe's saying, like making sure that you get those assignments out before. I want a clear expectation of that follow-up to be out in the air, right? So everybody knows how I'm going to follow up, not just what the milestones are or what the expectations are, right?
Now, have you been? I was thinking after this field note this morning that I'm probably not good enough at designating what is a follow-up on an ongoing project, because I have little things like, if I'm going to be like, okay, listen to this podcast, I'll do an L and I'll underline it, or if I have to write something or I have to email somebody or DM them. I'm not sure that for follow-up, I should have a designation on my list that says, underline, F you. Like, I'm not sure that that's going to be the best method, but I do believe that I'm not so good at keeping track of the steps of ongoing projects. So I don't know, Joe, do you have a method or a way that you keep a to-do list here and a tracking
Yeah,
list
sure.
here? How do you do it?
Yeah, so a couple things. I mean, one thing that I find it really helpful, and I think everybody in that meeting, Scott, would find it really helpful, is just the level of clarity that it comes from following through and having those conversations in the meeting, right?
Yes,
Because
right.
that's where progress gets lost around a lack of clarity
Right.
in many cases. When you circle back, that's what happened. People are like, I didn't know, I didn't understand, I didn't, right? And there's all types of leakage around that, right? So that's one part where it's super helpful, right? And then
You're just underlining it.
that's it. That's it. Underlining it, but underlining it within, to use your analogy, your cone of silence, right? That's the key,
Yeah.
right? So you're underlining in the cone of silence, which raises the efficacy of the information,
right.
right? Right. And then, you asked the question about, kind of how I approach it and think about it. And I think all of those things, the list, but I also think in terms of today too, right? And because I think what happens is sometimes people don't think about a today list. They don't think about what do I need to get done today, right? Because they can look at their tracking list, they can look at their other lists, the things that are important, the outside commitment, the internal commitment that they've matched with it. But what's also important to remember is what do I need to get done today? So I'm really focused on that. What do I need to get done today to create, sustain, and maintain momentum, right? Across a number of things.
Yeah, because you could make this too complicated. The other day, Mikey, you and I were talking about Oliver Berkman's book, Meditations for Mortals, and he had been a guest on our community conference. I went back and I started to reread that book, which is nicely segmented into chapters that you can read one a day for a month, and then you're done. But he makes the case that like people that are too fastidious, which could be me, like when you say, all right, I read this book, I underlined it, I looked at the summary, I read the Admired Leadership summary, and now I've got this, and I'm going to do these reminders, and I've got my ReadWise app. And then the intention of being so disciplined around it just gets in the way of, how did it change me? What's the thing I'm taking from it? And you can get so project oriented that you could be like, let me work on these 11 follow throughs and how I'm going to follow up on this. And you're so busy doing that you're not doing the thing, as they say. So how do you stay out of that in the bullet journal world?
Well, I don't I don't think it's an actual bullet journal thing at that point. I think it's more like stepping back and saying, how do I really allow others to accomplish the assignments that I'm giving them? Because that's really what this is. I'm giving you an assignment. I'd like you to accomplish it, but I'm going to check in a few different times to make sure that you know that my expectations are real.
Yeah.
Right? And so how do I kind of set up that assignment in such a way where I put the check-in responsibility on the person instead of on me, right? So there's a structure there that says, like, I'm going to hit a certain milestone that if I haven't heard from you, I'm going to check in with you. But I'd actually like to hear from you before that time is coming in. So let's all agree, as we're handing out assignments here, what the milestones of the projects are. And can we all share with each other once a milestone is crossed so that we can all celebrate progress together?
Right.
And that way, now it's your responsibility. And if I've broken up the task into subtasks well enough, then maybe I've created a back loop where I'm not feeling, now I'm still going to keep it in mind. Like, is this person, but I want the initiation to come from this person. And now if I'm following up with them, it doesn't feel like I'm micromanaging them. I'm just checking in on, I haven't heard from you on this agreed milestone.
Where does that stand? Yeah.
That's right. Well, and you're building routine, Mikey, right? And it's part of, when you think about it in terms of behaviors, that's what we have to understand, right? You're getting that opportunity in doing that to model, right, a behavior, right? And your people are absorbing that by osmosis from you in the setting in which you are. And when you do it enough, they think to themselves, that's the way it's done. I should do it that way too. Now think about the ripple effect of momentum that you're creating throughout an organization by bringing that level of focus Mikey and Scott are talking about here, and obviously the field note today.
Yeah. Well, and just going to the last line here as we wrap up on this field note on follow up and follow through, there's a beautiful phrase. We don't always have beautiful phrases in our field notes. They're pretty straightforward, but it talks about the idea that the most productive people don't drop the ball. They don't let initiatives languish from lack of attention. And I like that phrase because I think that if you are giving attention to and planning for the follow-up steps, then maybe this all does become the holy grail of effectiveness. And then obviously the natural question here is, Mikey, Joe is much busier than we are. There's more demands on his time. I don't know when we'll all get together again, but what should be our follow up and follow through so that the next time we get together, we move this
I'm
forward?
not setting an expectation for Joe here. It's for everybody. Like, we're going to bring in voices all the time, and we're not going to tell you. So just be.
Yeah, it's the hot seat. Yeah.
Right.
Any last words, Joe?
Appreciate it.
No, I just love this field note because, I mean, people were measured. One of the number one rules I've shared with my children forever and everyone else is do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
If you want to be ahead of 95, 98% of people in life, do what you say you're going to do. This field note, it lays directly on top of that. That's what excellence looks like. Do what you say you're going to do.
Amen. All right.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, everyone.